This one actually played to the incredible checkmate. Magnus, a great sport, and allows, I mean, the most spectacular checkmate combination I've ever seen in more than a decade of doing this. So Magnus Carlsen is playing against fellow Norwegian Jan Ludvig Hammer, also a grandmaster, rated at 2630. Of course, they're playing Blitz, so he's rated more like 2590. Magnus Carlsen, the world champion, and he has been the world champion in all categories before. He's rated at 2852 normally by Blitz, but for some reason, if you look on the ratings for the game, it's saying they're like 3171 and 2870. I'm not sure what that's all about, so if one of you happen to know, please do let me know. But let's just go ahead and get into this game. It's a very short game, just 26 moves, so basically a miniature smackdown of the reigning world champion. Hammer begins with pawn to e4, and Magnus goes with his signature move here, the modern defense with pawn to g6. This is also called a Robatsch, as you can see right over there. And now we have pawn to d4. This is the strongest move you can play in the position. You know, you really want to control the center of the board. And normally in the modern, you're going to have the bishop coming out here and also attacking the center of the board really early. But Magnus plays pawn to e6 here, which the computer calls that a flat-out mistake. That's just not the best move, not even close. Bishop to g7 is supposed to be the best move. So this particular variation has never happened before in a master game. This has never happened in a master game already, just 2 moves in. We now have knight to f3 by Hammer, and now knight to e7 by Magnus. Again, the computer says this is a mistake, and now this game has never occurred before. There is no recorded game that has ever been played this way, master or otherwise, and we're only 3 moves in. So Magnus trying to throw some sort of craziness out there to maybe lose Hammer so that Hammer doesn't know the opening. Let's go ahead and continue. We now have pawn to h4, probably looking to just go ahead and tear open the king's side here, as a lot of times if the bishop's coming to this fianchetto, then you're castling to the king's side. Magnus plays the best response here, pawn to h6, and now Hammer plays bishop to f4, a very strong move in the position. And now finally we do see the bishop coming to g7. As you may have guessed, this is the absolute best move in the position, as it would have been on many previous moves. And now we have the best response, queen to d2, just not allowing Magnus to castle really, as the pawn would be hanging. So if he castles, only the bishop defends. So putting some serious pressure on Magnus already. And now we have Magnus striking out at the center with pawn to d5. Hammer goes ahead and plays pawn to e5. Now we have pawn to c5, just further trying to undermine White's center. And now the best response is simply pawn to c3, played by White. Magnus plays knight from b to c6. And now we have knight to b3 by Hammer. And at this point, suggesting the best move is bishop to d3 here, rather than playing the knight there. But this is a minor inaccuracy, knight to a3 here. And now we have Magnus playing king to f8 here. Hammer goes ahead and grabs the c5 pawn. This is the best move in the position, so Magnus letting the pawn fall. And he actually goes ahead and offers a second pawn here with pawn to b6, just trying to get his pieces activated. Hammer accepts with c captures on b6. And then we have queen captures on b6 by the reigning world champion. And now we have, well, Hammer actually plays bishop to d3 here, which is not the best move in the position. Instead, he should have played knight to b5, aiming to go here. And we'll take a quick look at that variation, how that could have turned out better for White. So instead of playing bishop to d3 here, Hammer should have played knight to b5 here, defended by the bishop. Knight to f5 would be best for Black. White should go ahead and kick with pawn to g4, knight back to e7, and now that knight finds a glorious outpost on d6. And yeah, this would have been a better variation for white than what he should have accomplished on the actual chessboard. But we'll go ahead and go back to that variation now. So instead, Hammer plays bishop to d3 rather than the variation we saw, and we'll go ahead and continue here. We now have the best possible move in the position by Magnus, looking to trade off that dangerous bishop there that's putting pressure on the king side. Bishop to a6 here by Magnus, pawn to b4 by white, and the slight inaccuracy there says Stockfish. Better would be just to eliminate that bishop, but we'll continue. We now have pawn to d4 by Magnus, and Hammer does just go ahead and go for the pawn fork here. So pawn to b5, forking the knight and the bishop. And Magnus actually finds, of course, the very best move in the position. So you got a couple of pieces hanging here, a knight and a bishop. You can't just attack another knight or another bishop. You have to escalate the attack, and Magnus does with pawn captures on c3, now threatening the queen. So the queen has to remove herself from that square. And Hammer actually makes a mistake here. He plays queen to e3, which gives Magnus the advantage in the position. He should have instead gone to e2, and we'll take a look at that variation now. So instead of playing queen to e3 as played on the board, it should have been queen to e2, and then best for black would be knight to d4. White should go ahead and capture with knight captures on d4. We have queen captures on d4 by black. Bishop back to e3, attacking the queen, and the queen should go ahead and run over to a4, attacking that loose knight. And now pawn captures bishop would be best on a6. Queen captures knight, and then white could start to undermine the king side with pawn to h5. This would have been a better way to play than what actually happened on the chessboard, but we'll go ahead and go back to that variation now. So instead, Hammer plays queen to e3, probably defending the bishop here is what he's looking to do, and because he had loose pieces. He had a couple of loose pieces. The knight was loose, the bishop was loose, and so this move defends the bishop, but also offers a queen trade. We have knight now to d5 by Magnus, basically forcing the queen trades. So now queen captures queen on b6 by Hammer, and pawn captures on b6 by Magnus. And now Hammer goes ahead and grabs the bishop with b captures bishop on a6. And then Magnus is pretty happy with going ahead and grabbing the bishop on f4 here. Best move in the position. And now we have bishop to e4, attacking the knight, seemingly pinning it. And you might think, well, go ahead and defend here. Well, defend with rook over here. But instead, Magnus plays the absolute strongest move. He grabs the pawn on a6. And so the knight falls with bishop captures c6, but Magnus gets to go ahead and take the knight on a3, and Magnus has a 1-point lead at this point as far as material advantage. And now, best move in the position, believe it or not, by Hammer is just castling queenside here. So castles by white. And now Magnus is hoping to probably escape here. If he could just get over here, he should be fairly safe, you would think. You would think Magnus would be safe if he can get over here, but there's something going on here that evidently he missed. And this game is actually almost over. The world champion about to be crushed. So after castles, Magnus actually runs with his king to g8 here, hoping to maybe get here and get over to h7 and get his king safe. But Hammer actually plays rook to d8 here, checking the king. And this isn't the best move in the position, actually. It would have been better, says the engine, just to play pawn to g3 and chase that knight away, which, okay, that's interesting. But Hammer plays this move, rook to d8, and Magnus should play bishop to f8 here. We'll take a look at the variation where bishop blocks first here. So after rook to d8, bishop to f8 would have been better. king now to B1 would be best for white, and now king to G7 would be best for Magnus. This would have been a way better position than what Magnus ended up with. Actually, he's winning this position. He's got this nice pass pawn way down here. He's up a pawn, and yeah, Magnus would have been winning this game, but instead, in a bout of carelessness that's just not something that Magnus Carlsen normally does, he blunders and plays a completely different move. And let's go back to that now. So instead, Magnus Carlsen, the world champion, blunders here and plays king to H7. And this is actually a mate in 14. It's a guaranteed mate in 14, although there would be a lot of just kind of wasted moves. Black could throw away a bunch of pieces basically to prevent checkmate. The actual checkmate ends up going a lot faster. Maybe pause your video and think about whether or not you can find the winning combination. It ends up being a mate in 5, and Magnus probably sees this fairly on. Like, obviously he missed it when he made this move. He probably sees it fairly early on in this combination and just ends up being a good sport and just allows Hammer to play this spectacular finish. So hopefully you've paused your video if you're trying to find the move. But did you find the absolute best move, knight to G5? And yeah, the knight has to be captured because obviously the king can't move. So we have pawn captures knight on G5, only move. And now Magnus, of course, captures back with H captures on G5. If you just block with the bishop, well then, the rook's going to capture. And when the king steps out of the way, the other rook can capture this rook, and then this rook can come down and will checkmate the king. So you can't do that. So instead, knight to H5 seems to work. And maybe Magnus imagined this and thought about pawn to G4, and well, Magnus would be okay in such a position. But instead, maybe you can find the move here that Hammer played. Hopefully pause your video if you wanted to think about that, but he plays rook captures on H5, and yeah, there's, you could block with the bishop, which also leads to checkmate, although it lasts a little bit longer. Instead, he plays pawn captures on H5, and now we have bishop to E4, and Magnus only has one legal move that he can make. Pawn to F5 seems to stop checkmate, but as you may or may not know, you can actually capture that pawn. You could capture it with this pawn or this pawn with a maneuver called en passant, as many of you probably know, but maybe some of you don't. It's one of the most obscure, it's probably the most obscure move in chess. Now, this pawn is responsible for the H6 square, so you don't want to capture with this one. But if you capture en passant this way, as Hammer did, it is checkmate. And the world champion does fall to an en passant checkmate. I've never seen that before. That's got to be one of the most spectacular checkmates I've ever seen. Let's just see that again. So yeah, just forced mate here. There would have been some ways where you could throw away some pieces, and prolonged checkmate, but this was the most elegant, and Magnus Carlsen, an excellent sport for allowing this to actually occur on the chessboard. So that's the game. Pretty awesome. Thank you for checking that out. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe, as I will be doing game reviews every day, as well as posting tactics. I've been doing some tactical shorts and stuff like that. So if you're into chess, please join me. And also let me know if you think there's something I should cover. Is there some tournaments out there that I'm missing? I definitely want to cover up-and-coming masters. Thank you, everybody. Take care.